At my father's funeral, while 150 mourners watched, my brother stood up during the eulogy and announced that I had never contributed a penny to Dad's medical care and was too selfish to help during his final years. I waited until he finished, then walked to my car and returned with a folder containing $47,000 worth of medical receipts, all with my name on them. Before I dive into this story of family betrayal at the worst possible moment, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever been publicly blamed for something you actually sacrificed everything to handle, and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of justice served with undeniable documentation. My name is Jessica, I'm 38 years old, and this story begins with my father's 3-year battle with cancer and ends with the most shocking confrontation I could have never imagined at his funeral service. What happened in between taught me that some family members will lie about your contributions even when you're grieving the loss of someone you both loved. My father, David Chen, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in March 2021 at age 67. The diagnosis came as a complete shock. Dad had always been healthy, active, and seemingly invincible to his family. He'd worked as a mechanical engineer for 35 years, raised 3 children as a single father after Mom died when I was 16, and had plans to travel and enjoy retirement. Cancer changed everything overnight. Pancreatic cancer is one of the most aggressive and expensive cancers to treat. Dad's oncologist outlined a treatment plan that would include surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, and potentially experimental treatments if the standard protocols didn't work. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs would be substantial. I have 2 siblings, my older brother Marcus, who's 42, and my younger sister Kelly, who's 34. When Dad was diagnosed, we had a family meeting to discuss how we'd support him through treatment and manage the financial implications. "We all need to contribute," Marcus announced, taking charge as he always did as the oldest child. "Dad's insurance will cover most things, but there will be co-pays, medications, and other expenses. We should split everything 3 ways." Kelly and I agreed immediately. Dad had sacrificed for all of us throughout our lives, working overtime to pay for our college educations and supporting us through various financial difficulties as adults. Contributing to his medical expenses seemed like the most basic expression of love and gratitude. Marcus, who works in sales and has always been the most financially comfortable of the 3 siblings, volunteered to coordinate the payments and keep track of expenses. "I'll handle the logistics," he said. "Just send me your portions and I'll make sure everything gets paid on time." This arrangement seemed practical and efficient. Marcus lived closest to Dad, had the most flexible work schedule, and was naturally organized about financial matters. For the first few months, the system worked as planned. Marcus would text Kelly and me with updates about Dad's treatments and requests for money to cover various expenses. I would transfer my portion immediately, usually between $800 and $1,200 monthly, and Kelly would do the same. But by late 2021, I started noticing discrepancies in Marcus's reports. He'd ask for money for specific treatments or medications, but when I'd ask Dad how he was feeling after those treatments, Dad would seem confused about what I was referring to. "I didn't have radiation this week," Dad would say when I'd ask about side effects from the radiation Marcus had said we were paying for. "The new medication is working well," I'd comment, and Dad would look puzzled because he hadn't started any new medication. Initially, I assumed these were just communication errors or that Dad was confused about his treatment schedule due to the stress and medication side effects. Cancer treatment is overwhelming, and patients don't always track every detail of their care. But the discrepancies became more frequent and more significant. In January 2022, Marcus requested $2,400 from Kelly and me to cover an experimental treatment that Dad's insurance wouldn't approve. I sent my $800 portion immediately, but when I called Dad to ask how the new treatment was going, he had no idea what I was talking about. "I'm not getting any experimental treatments, sweetheart," Dad said. "The oncologist wants to stick with the standard protocol for now." That's when I realized something was wrong with our financial arrangement. I started asking Dad directly about his medical expenses and discovered that Marcus had been significantly misrepresenting the costs and sometimes requesting money for treatments that weren't actually happening. More troubling, I learned that some of Dad's actual medical bills were going unpaid while Marcus was collecting money from Kelly and me for expenses that didn't exist. The cancer center called about an overdue balance, Dad mentioned during one of our weekly phone calls. I thought Marcus was handling the payments. I immediately called the cancer center's billing department and learned that they had outstanding invoices totaling over $8,000 that were past due. Meanwhile, Marcus had been collecting monthly contributions from Kelly and me that should have easily covered these bills. When I confronted Marcus about the discrepancies, he became defensive and accusatory. "I'm doing my best to coordinate everything while you and Kelly live your comfortable lives," he snapped. "Do you have any idea how stressful it is to manage Dad's care while working full-time?" "Marcus, I'm not questioning your efforts. I'm questioning where the money is going. Dad has overdue medical bills, but we've been sending you money every month. There are always unexpected expenses with cancer treatment. Sometimes I have to front costs and reimburse myself later." His explanations were vague and inconsistent, but he made me feel guilty for questioning his handling of Dad's finances during such a difficult time. However, the situation became impossible to ignore when Dad's oncologist's office called me directly in March 2022. "Ms. Chen, your father's account is significantly past due, and we need to discuss payment arrangements," the billing coordinator said. "We've been trying to reach the family member who said he was handling payments, but we haven't received any response." The outstanding balance was over $12,000 for treatments Dad had received between December and February. According to my records, Kelly and I had sent Marcus over $4,000 during that same period specifically for medical expenses. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I would start paying Dad's medical bills directly instead of sending money to Marcus. I called Dad and gently explained that I wanted to take a more active role in managing his medical expenses. "Dad, I'd like to help coordinate your medical bills. Would you be comfortable adding me as an authorized contact with your healthcare providers?" "Of course, sweetheart. I appreciate any help you can provide." Within a week, I had established myself as an authorized contact with Dad's oncologist, the cancer center's billing department, his pharmacy, and his insurance company. What I discovered was shocking. Marcus had been collecting monthly contributions from Kelly and me for nearly a year, but he had only made sporadic payments to Dad's actual medical providers. Dad's accounts were seriously delinquent, his credit was being damaged, and some providers were threatening to discontinue treatment due to non-payment. More disturbing was the realization that the total amount Kelly and I had sent to Marcus far exceeded Dad's actual medical expenses. We had provided enough money to cover all of Dad's care, but most of it had never reached the healthcare providers. I spent the next 3 days calling every medical provider and paying Dad's outstanding balances directly from my personal accounts. The total came to $18,000 in past due bills that should have been covered by the money we'd been sending to Marcus. When I confronted Marcus with documentation of the unpaid bills and evidence of our payments to him, he finally admitted what had been happening. "I got behind on some personal expenses," he said, his voice lacking its usual authority. "I borrowed some of Dad's medical money temporarily, but I always planned to pay it back." "You stole from Dad's cancer treatment fund?" "I didn't steal anything. I just had some cash flow issues and needed to use the money temporarily." "Dad's treatments were being canceled because of unpaid bills while you were using his medical money for personal expenses?" "It was never going to hurt Dad. I was managing everything." The betrayal was breathtaking. While our father was fighting for his life, Marcus had been stealing money intended for his medical care and allowing his accounts to become delinquent. I immediately told Kelly what had happened, and we decided to remove Marcus from any involvement in Dad's financial care. From March 2022 forward, Kelly and I would handle all medical expenses directly, and Marcus would no longer have access to funds intended for Dad's treatment. This arrangement meant that I became the primary coordinator of Dad's medical expenses. I was making payments to multiple providers, managing insurance claims, and ensuring all bills were current. The monthly costs ranged from $1,200 to $3,500, depending on Dad's treatment schedule and medication needs. Kelly contributed what she could, but as a school teacher with 2 young children, her financial resources were limited. Most months, she could provide $300 to $500, which left me covering the majority of Dad's medical expenses. I didn't resent this arrangement because Dad's health was my priority, and I had the financial resources to handle the costs. But it did mean that I was quietly paying thousands of dollars monthly for his care while Marcus contributed nothing after being removed from financial responsibilities due to his theft. Throughout 2022 and into 2023, I maintained careful records of every medical expense I paid on Dad's behalf. I kept receipt copies, payment confirmations, and detailed spreadsheets tracking costs by category and provider. This documentation was initially just for my own financial organization, but it became essential when Dad's condition worsened in late 2023. Dad fought courageously for 3 years, but pancreatic cancer ultimately took his life in February 2024. His final months were especially difficult, requiring intensive treatments, specialized medications, and additional care services that significantly increased medical expenses. During Dad's last 6 months, I was paying between $4,000 and $6,000 monthly for his medical care, including treatments that weren't covered by insurance, comfort medications, and supportive services that improved his quality of life. Kelly helped when she could, but the bulk of these final expenses came from my accounts. By the time Dad passed away, I had paid approximately $47,000 in medical expenses over the nearly 2 years since taking over his financial care. Dad died peacefully at home with all 3 children present. Despite the family's financial tensions, we had maintained our relationship with him and ensured he received excellent medical care throughout his illness. The funeral arrangements were handled cooperatively, with all 3 siblings contributing to costs and working together to plan a service that honored Dad's life and values. St. Matthew's Church was filled with 150 people who had come to pay respects to a man who had been a devoted father, reliable friend, and respected colleague. The service included readings from Dad's favorite scriptures, music he had loved, and eulogies from family members and friends. Marcus had asked to speak on behalf of our family, which seemed appropriate as the oldest child. Kelly and I had prepared our own brief remarks, but Marcus was delivering the primary family eulogy. His speech began beautifully, sharing memories of Dad's dedication to his children, his work ethic, and his courage during his cancer battle. Marcus spoke movingly about Dad's determination to fight the disease and his gratitude for the family support that had made his medical care possible. Then Marcus shifted his focus to family dynamics during Dad's illness. "Our father faced this terrible disease with incredible bravery," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger and more pointed. "But he didn't face it alone. Some family members stepped up to shoulder the burden of his medical care, while others chose to distance themselves when things got difficult." I felt a chill of apprehension as Marcus continued. "I want everyone to know that while our father was fighting for his life, I made enormous personal sacrifices to ensure he received the best possible medical care. I coordinated his treatments, managed his insurance, and covered his medical expenses even when it meant financial hardship for my own family." Congregation was listening attentively, assuming this was leading to a message about family love and sacrifice. Instead, Marcus turned toward me. "Unfortunately, not all of Dad's children shared this commitment to family responsibility. My sister Jessica chose to distance herself from our father's medical needs, never contributing a penny to his care and leaving me to handle everything alone." Church fell completely silent. 150 people were staring at me as Marcus continued his public character assassination. While I was coordinating doctor appointments, managing medications, and paying thousands of dollars in medical bills, Jessica was too busy with her own life to help. She rarely visited, never offered to contribute financially, and seemed content to let others handle the difficult responsibilities of caring for our dying father. I sat in stunned disbelief as my brother used our father's funeral to publicly shame me for alleged neglect and selfishness. Every word he said was not only false but the complete opposite of reality. "I don't share this to embarrass anyone," Marcus continued, though his intention was clearly to embarrass me. "But I want Dad's friends and colleagues to understand the sacrifice some family members made to ensure he received excellent care during his final years. Not everyone stepped up when he needed them most. Congregation was uncomfortable but captivated by this unexpected family drama unfolding during a funeral service. Some people were looking at me with sympathy, others with judgment, and most with confusion about what they were witnessing. So Marcus concluded his eulogy with false humility. "I don't need recognition for the sacrifices I made for our father. Knowing that he received the care he deserved is reward enough. But I hope others will remember the importance of family loyalty when people we love are facing their darkest hours." He returned to his seat amid uncertain applause from people who didn't know how to respond to a eulogy that had become a family attack. I sat in the front pew, my hands trembling with rage and disbelief. Marcus had used the most sacred moment of our father's memorial service to publicly shame me with lies about my involvement in Dad's care. But Marcus had made one critical error. I had documentation proving everything he had said was false. For nearly 2 years, I had been keeping meticulous records of every medical expense I had paid on Dad's behalf. The folder containing those receipts was in my car, parked just outside the church. I waited until Marcus had fully returned to his seat, then stood up and walked steadily down the center aisle toward the church exit. Congregation watched in silence as I left the sanctuary. I walked to my car, opened the glove compartment, and retrieved a thick folder labeled Dad's Medical Expenses 2022 to 2024. The folder contained nearly 200 receipts, payment confirmations, and billing statements documenting every dollar I had spent on Dad's cancer treatment. I returned to the church and walked back down the center aisle to the front of the sanctuary. Pastor looked confused, but I gestured that I needed to speak. "I apologize for interrupting," I said, my voice steady despite my anger. "But my brother's eulogy contains some inaccuracies that need to be corrected." I opened the folder and pulled out the first stack of receipts. Marcus said I never contributed to Dad's medical care and left him to handle everything alone. This folder contains documentation of $47,000 in medical expenses I paid directly to Dad's healthcare providers over the past 2 years. I held up receipts as I spoke, showing the congregation proof of my payments. These are receipts for chemotherapy treatments, radiation therapy, prescription medications, doctor visits, and specialized care services. All paid for by me directly to Dad's medical providers. The church was absolutely silent except for my voice reading payment details. Marcus also said he coordinated Dad's medical care and paid his expenses. What he didn't mention is that I took over Dad's medical payments in March 2022 after discovering that thousands of dollars Kelly and I had given Marcus for medical expenses had never reached Dad's healthcare providers. I pulled out the billing statements from Dad's cancer center showing the past due balances that had existed when I took over his medical care. These billing statements show that Dad's accounts were seriously delinquent when I began paying them directly. The money we had been sending to Marcus for medical expenses had not been used for Dad's care. Marcus was staring at me with obvious panic. Kelly looked shocked. She had known I was paying most of Dad's expenses but hadn't known the full extent. I also have phone records showing weekly calls to Dad throughout his illness, visit logs from the cancer center where I accompanied him to appointments, and correspondence with his medical team about treatment options. I looked directly at Marcus. "I don't know why you chose Dad's funeral to lie about my involvement in his care, but since you decided to make this public, the facts should also be public." I returned to my seat, leaving the folder of receipts on the altar as evidence of what I had shared. The remainder of the funeral service was awkward and tense. Pastor offered brief closing remarks, clearly unsure how to transition from family financial accusations back to honoring Dad's memory. As mourners filed out of the church, many stopped to offer condolences and quietly express their shock at what had transpired during the service. "I had no idea you were carrying that burden alone," my father's longtime friend Tom said as he shook my hand. "Your dad would be proud of how you took care of him." My Aunt Linda, Dad's sister, was more direct. "Marcus owes you an enormous apology. What he did up there was unconscionable." Several of Dad's former colleagues approached me to acknowledge my sacrifices and express their dismay at Marcus's public accusations. But Marcus himself said nothing. He avoided eye contact as he left the church and didn't speak to me at the reception that followed. Confrontation at Dad's funeral became a permanent rift in our family relationships. Kelly, once she fully understood what had happened with Dad's medical expenses and Marcus's theft of funds intended for his care, was furious with Marcus and supportive of my decision to expose his lies publicly. "He stole Dad's medical money, then dared to attack you publicly for not contributing," she said when we talked later that evening. "That's beyond cruel. It's sociopathic." Marcus initially tried to justify his funeral speech by claiming he had been emotional and not thinking clearly due to grief. But when I presented him with complete documentation of Dad's medical expenses and evidence of his financial theft, he couldn't maintain his defensive position. "I made mistakes with Dad's money," he finally admitted during a phone conversation 2 weeks after the funeral. "But I was under incredible stress managing his care." "You weren't managing his care, Marcus. You were stealing from his medical fund while I was actually paying his bills and coordinating his treatments. I always intended to pay back what I borrowed." "You didn't borrow anything. You stole money intended for cancer treatment and then publicly accused me of the neglect you were actually guilty of." Conversation ended with no resolution or genuine apology from Marcus. 6 months after Dad's death, Marcus sent me a check for $12,000 with a note saying it represented partial repayment of funds he had misappropriated from Dad's medical expenses. The amount was far less than what he had actually taken, and the gesture felt more like an attempt to reduce his legal liability than genuine remorse for his behavior. I deposited the check but didn't respond to his note. The money didn't repair the damage his funeral accusations had caused to my reputation or our family relationships. The most lasting impact of the funeral confrontation wasn't the financial resolution. It was the clarity it provided about Marcus's character and the vindication it gave me about my own actions during Dad's illness. For nearly 2 years, I had quietly sacrificed my own financial goals to ensure Dad received excellent medical care. I had managed his treatments, coordinated with his healthcare team, and paid substantial expenses without seeking recognition or credit. Marcus's attempt to rewrite history and portray me as negligent had backfired because I had documentation proving the opposite was true. The funeral confrontation taught me several important lessons about family dynamics and documentation. First, people who exploit family crises for personal gain will often try to blame others for their own failures. Marcus's theft of Dad's medical money became my alleged neglect in his version of events. Second, keeping detailed financial records isn't just good organization, it's protection against false accusations and historical revisionism. Without those receipts, Marcus's lies might have gone unchallenged. Third, sometimes public confrontations are necessary to correct public lies, even in inappropriate settings like funerals. While exposing Marcus's deception during Dad's memorial service was uncomfortable, allowing his false narrative to stand would have been worse. Most importantly, I learned that doing the right thing doesn't always receive recognition, but it does provide peace of mind and moral clarity. Even when Marcus was publicly attacking my character, I knew the truth about my own actions and sacrifices. 2 years after Dad's death, I have no relationship with Marcus. His theft of Dad's medical funds and his cruel funeral accusations destroyed any possibility of an ongoing family connection. My relationship with Kelly has strengthened as we've supported each other through grief and family dysfunction. She has expressed gratitude for my handling of Dad's medical care and regret that she wasn't able to contribute more financially during his illness. The $47,000 I spent on Dad's medical expenses was money well invested in ensuring he received excellent care during his final years. While the amount was substantial, it allowed Dad to access treatments and services that improved his quality of life and gave us more time together. I don't regret the financial sacrifice or the decision to expose Marcus's lies at the funeral. Dad deserved both excellent medical care and an honest accounting of who provided it. Sometimes the most important revenge isn't punishment, it's simply truth. Marcus's attempt to rewrite history failed because I had documentation proving what actually happened. If you're caring for an aging or ill family member, keep detailed records of your contributions and expenses. Family dynamics can become complicated during medical crises, and documentation protects both you and the person you're caring for. And if someone tries to publicly lie about your contributions to family responsibilities, don't hesitate to correct the record with facts and evidence. Truth is more powerful than false narratives, especially when you have receipts to prove it. If you enjoyed this story of family medical crisis and funeral justice served, please give this video a like and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of people who stood up for the truth when family members tried to rewrite history. Share your own experiences with family medical expenses in the comments below. Have you ever been blamed for not contributing when you were actually carrying most of the burden? Remember that caring for family members during illness is one of the most important things we can do, and that contribution should be acknowledged honestly rather than exploited for personal gain. Thank you for listening to my story of medical expenses and funeral receipts. Sometimes the best revenge against people who lie about your sacrifices is simply having proof of what you actually did.